So we wanted to look at why it's important to spend the time checking in mentally, why it's important to look within the mind, and how do we do this? So what do you think, Corey? What's the best way to get into a habit of taking that time to do that kind of introspective work?
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, for me, just to answer your point about why it's important is because it leads to unhealthy behavior. It leads to undesirable behavior, undesirable consequences. And negative thinking feeds more negative thinking, which feeds more negative thinking. And so to catch it and to cut it off leads to a healthier, happier me, ultimately. That would be my shortest answer for that.
Yeah. So how are you supposed to know really how you're doing if you don't take the time to honestly assess yourself in that way? I mean, How many people do that on a daily basis? I don't know. I used to not to barely ever, actually sit and take the time to look and kind of check in with myself that way. And then, like you said, if you're having an issue with negative thoughts or something's bothering you, you're not like, I wouldn't notice it until it started to manifest in physical symptoms.
Yeah.
So whether that's anxiety or tension in the body, I guess the desired outcome is if you are in a situation where something's bothering you and you catch it earlier, then there's a better chance of being able to steer off that course.
Yeah, that's right. And the any kind of an addictive behavior, or particularly an addictive behavior with a substance, with drugs, with specifically opiates, let's say, that's really obvious, right? Like that's a glaring example of where you have a string of negative thoughts that lead to some anxiety, and then you go and try to cope with that anxiety, or you get an urge or a craving and you go and self medicate or self-soothe to manage that. And then inevitably that negative thought comes back whenever down the road, and you're on this loop again, right?
Yeah. It's like you're driving down the highway, and instead of pulling over and checking on the sound that your car is making, you just continue until your tire blows off and you're in the ditch. And then instead of trying to deal with it in a proper way, you just throw some duct tape on your vehicle and push it out of the ditch and keep going. That's a lot like what you do when you're using a substance like that to continue whatever kind of tough situation you're in.
Yeah. And so you go through a rehab program, say, and you remove drugs and alcohol and any kind of substance from your life. And what remains, though, are those thoughts.
That's right. Yeah.
And rehab programs and counseling do, depending on all of the specifics of those things, do a good job or maybe not a good job of helping manage that. But either way, that is what is left. And that is what is the hardest part of the whole show, is that suddenly now you're left to your own devices. There aren't those coping strategies that have been so effective at helping us manage. And it's just the thoughts, right? So for me, that's a big thing, is that those thoughts are still, that's a daily exercise of making sure that I don't go down this negative path of negative thinking that creates a feeling of stress and anxiety and disease within my body. Because when it comes back to it, I have to be the one solely to cope with that and to manage that.
And it's a skill, right? It's something
it
that
absolutely is.
Yeah, you learn, you practice, you get better at it. And I think maybe some people are naturally very good at this. They're more prone to accurate introspection. And I think there's other people you can tell by, at least you suspect by talking to them, that they maybe haven't checked in the last couple of years.
Sure, for sure.
How do we do what we're talking about? What's the best way to accomplish this, or what's a method that you found useful?
Oh, so a few things. You mentioned it a moment ago, just checking in with what our body feels like. So doing a little mindfulness check to see, am I relaxed right now? Am I feeling at ease? Am I feeling comfortable? Or am I showing all of these physical signs of stress and anxiety within my body? And I mean, that could be as easy as if you're wearing a Fitbit, what's my heart rate? But it could also be, what do I feel like? Or do I feel stiff, and do I have a headache? And, for me, when I'm really, really stressed, or I'm not doing the things I need to do to de-stress, that's a manifestation for me, is a real fullness in my head. And that's kind of a late sign that, okay, I should have probably checked in a little bit sooner with myself.
Right. And I believe there's professional methods where you could probably actually go on YouTube and they'll guide you through a process where you do an actual piece by piece check-in with, starting with your big toe and ending with the top of your head type of thing. And those can be surprisingly effective too. I've done that a few times, and it's interesting when you spend that much time focusing that intently, you could actually pick up some stuff that you're not aware of. When we're walking around doing our jobs and just going through life, it's surprising how many little things can kind of build up in your body. And a lot of them build to the point where they become a situation that you can't ignore anymore. But it's surprising how many just below the surface kind of, I don't know if you call them ailments, I guess, or manifestations of tension or anxiety or whatever they are.
Yeah. And exactly. And that's just it. There's a manifestation of it. And I think that was a big lesson for me to learn, was that there is a consequence to those negative thoughts. And I spent so much of my adult life, at least, mulling over those negative thoughts, or sitting in those negative thoughts, thinking that they were inconsequential, or thinking that sort of just, that's where it ended. And I wasn't making that connection that the behavior that I was exhibiting was a direct result of those negative thoughts. And it's kind of a smart recovery tool, or a smart recovery phrase, that a thought leads to a feeling, which leads to a behavior. And making that connection for me has been life-changing.
Yeah, it's a very straightforward kind of idea. And it's, I believe it was cognitive behavioral therapy that it's based in. And they have the thoughts, feelings, actions triangle, I think they call it.
Yeah.
And if you want to change one of those three sides of the triangle, or if you want to change something in the triangle, all you have to do is change one of those three things, and the rest follow. So if you're feeling bad and you exercise, for example, it's likely that whatever negative feeling you're experiencing will at least shift. And that's kind of the theory behind it. But it makes perfect sense when you describe like your situation. You're stuck in negative thoughts all the time. Who could withstand that? And especially if you think that they're inconsequential. I mean,
exactly. And I've used this example before in our discussion, that, for me, it's such an easy example of, you go into a store, you run into someone that and they are weird to you. They give you a look, or they're not as friendly as they used to be. And then I leave the store and I'm thinking about that interaction. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling uncomfortable in my own skin. And now I am drug and alcohol free. So it's not like I would go and use, but I might, go inward and retreat, or I might get angry, or be unfriendly or unkind, or I might go and eat, or there's so many behavioral adaptations to manage those feelings, those uncomfortable feelings. We have, as humans, so many ways of manifesting a feeling to make it feel better. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so to change that thought in the first place, like that's kind of step one, and to think, I don't know what's going on with that person. It's probably not about me. I know how I'm doing. I'm just here to do my thing. I'm doing the best that I can. And to challenge that negative thought that creeps in does wonders for alleviating that stress or preventing that stress from coming on, which then does wonders for preventing any kind of behavioral maladaptive thing that can occur.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's a great kind of overview example. And I think it's one that a lot of people can relate to, myself included, and something that I kind of, I don't know, I forget who, it's either somebody said it or I read it in a book somewhere. I had sort of an epiphany, but the reality of the situation is that nobody really gives a fuck. And most people are consumed with what's going on in their life, in their mind. So walking around believing that, somebody looked at you funny and it's got something to do with you and all this stuff. Sometimes maybe it does. Maybe that person does have a problem with you, but there's, you can't address all those concerns without looking like you're unhinged, for one thing. And again, it's we can only control, and we're only in power or in control of what we can do, how we can react to those situations. So I think that I would have been guilty too of ruminating on that, or trying to figure out why and reading things into it that are ridiculous and over exaggerating the situation. And now I'm just, it's probably maybe the person's having a bad day. Maybe they just got a phone call that their grandma has cancer.
Right.
There's a million things that person could be going through that you have no understanding of. So
yeah, and so the thing that comes to mind for me there, Nathan, is that my brain does not like uncertainty.
It does not like brain.
Nobody's brain does, really. Nobody, like that blank space that uncertainty creates, that blank canvas that maybe just has a question mark on it. And so my brain in particular wants to fill that in with something. And I think because negativity is such a well-traveled pathway, I can go to it so quickly. And we were going to talk about catastrophizing, worst case scenario thinking. That's kind of a default setting for me. And to dispute that. So for me, the solution to that is to dispute that. And when I have a situation of uncertainty and I go to that place of the worst case scenario, just a simple phrase is, says who? Says who it's going to turn out this way, or says who that this is what that other person is thinking about me.
Or where's the evidence?
Or where's the evidence of that?
Yeah.
And quickly I'm like, well, there is no evidence. I'm like, oh, damn it, I did it again. There is no evidence.
That's right.
Says who? Nobody. It's just that inner critic of mine that says who.
Yeah.
And and that kind of can derail that negative thought. And then particularly if you can replace that negative thought with I can only control what I can control, or I'm doing the best that I can, it's even more helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about it's kind of jumping in with a rational argument against your own kind of, I don't know if it's for us, I think it's probably a default setting. For a long time, my most difficult cognitive behavioral therapy issue, as far as negative thinking goes, is probably all or nothing. I can be going along, everything's pretty good. I'm feeling okay about life in general, and then something happens that I don't like. Okay, whatever. Another thing happens, and then maybe 3 things happen in a short period of time, and the world is ending. I just go completely dark side. And it took me a long time to realize that I was doing that. And it took me more time still to understand the flaw as far as that being an irrational. It doesn't make any sense to think like that, and it doesn't do you any good.
It's harmful. It's harmful. And, you know, I another example I can think of was like, oh God, like a week or two into recovery and saying to my family, I'll never be happy. Or what if I'm never happy?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that in itself is kind of an irrational statement, because how do I know that I'll never be happy? And what's the evidence that I'll never be happy? But planting that seed and telling myself I'll never be happy, and that's making that a pretty, there's no uncertainty in that statement. It's pretty black and white. Like, this is how you will always be.
Mm-hmm.
That is really harmful, and that was a harmful place to be mentally. And I mean, it was very shortly after that I got into counseling, got into support groups and stuff, and have learned to break through that thinking. And I haven't had that thought now, even with uncertainty and with stress that still exists in my life. Like, that's a pretty extreme statement to go to, right?
Well, it is, because if you're correct, that's horrible, and the rest of your life you're going to be unhappy. And if you're not correct, you're wrong. So you've you've put yourself in a position where either outcome of that statement is not great.
No, and it's a very mentally dangerous place to be stuck in.
Mm-hmm.
And it leaves us very, very vulnerable, because those negative thoughts can build upon each other. And I think of people who feel suicidal, and that's, I wasn't suicidal at that time, or when I made that statement, but you can very easily see how then those thoughts can stack up and can mount, and it's very dangerous.
It absolutely is dangerous. That was probably one of the most insightful, useful things I discovered out of this, the whole, going through the recovery process, was the power of these they seem simple, these CBT kind of paradigms, but they're just so effective if you can keep track of them. If you're aware of the ones that are most likely to give you trouble, and then you get used to stepping in and questioning them and kind of auditing those beliefs, like what you were talking about there.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that. That was a tool that I was going to suggest. One of the things that people learn in recovery is to log their urges and to audit what their urges and cravings are like. But I would even challenge that, even if you're not having urges and cravings, to log that state of mind, to log those thought patterns, that what's going on for me at the time that I'm having those types of, catastrophic thinking or fortune telling thinking or all or none thinking. And are there patterns that are there? And for me, I can certainly see patterns that have been in place where again, uncertainty being one of them, or a social interaction, or an interaction that sort of challenges my beliefs about myself, or about who I am, or about various aspects of my life. And then it snowballs from there. So to recognize those patterns is really helpful, because then we can change those patterns. We can change the variables.
Yeah. In every case, awareness is the first step.
For sure.
So catastrophizing, how do you look at that as far as a definition? For me, I think of that as just a default setting where something bad happens, or maybe something doesn't go your way, and you automatically go to the worst case scenario, thinking that's most likely to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that's one I don't have so much trouble with it anymore, but I did at one time. I think it was closely tied in with all or nothing, where things would be rolling along smooth, and then everything would kind of go sideways on me.
Yeah. I really relate that one to like our primal instincts, that at one time it was that kept us safe and kept us away from predators. That if we go out of our safety zone within the plains that we foraged on, we're at risk for predators, and we're going to get eaten. And it's different now, and we don't need that now, but it's a very primal thing where our brain goes to, oh my God, I gotta get out of this, or oh my God, the worst thing's going to happen.
Yeah, you're right. It is primitive. Or childlike even. It's kind of like
childlike. Yeah.
You see a kid throw a tantrum. It's basically a physical manifestation of their mind not being able to cope with, they're swinging wildly in an emotional sense, right?
Yeah. Or if you took away the toy from them, that toy's gone forever in their mind.
Yeah. And consequently the world is going to explode. And
yeah.
The other ones I put down here just as notables for me is disqualifying the positive. That's probably one that you have an issue with as well.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is you have two events that happen. Both are of equal importance or magnitude. One is negative, one is positive. I tend to focus on the negative one far more than I do the positive. And if you put a bunch of those, maybe there's 10 of each, I'm always focused on the negative, and I'm not looking, I think, well, yeah, there's some good things that happen, but they don't really matter. It's always the negative stuff that I'm drawn to. And yeah, maybe that is a little bit of a human tendency, but it certainly can be measured on a scale. And I think it's one that I've struggled with a lot, but again, I've come a long way with it as well.
Oh man, me too. And just to speak to our brothers and sisters in recovery in the healthcare world, this is one that is, I think, a really pretty epidemic thought that what happened with whatever the addiction was, that all of the good that was done in their career is for naught and is devoid of any kind of meaning, and all of the good that they did. And people you and I both know people who have, saved many lives and reached many people and made incredible positive differences in people's lives. And for, all of the reasons that we've talked about, an addiction occurs, and the thinking that we have about ourselves is that all of that stuff is erased.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's a very challenging task to kind of tell yourself otherwise, and to make yourself believe that all of the good that I did is not erased because this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And things might look different moving forward with your career or not, but either way, the all of the good is not erased.
Yeah, it's difficult, especially in that situation, to not remain, but to try to be objective. When you're self-examining and you feel that shitty, it's a very difficult task.
Yeah. And it's been helpful for me to reflect on those moments where I felt like I did a really great job, and where I had a positive outcome with a patient, say, and saved a life.
Yeah.
And just to mindfully be aware of that situation or that memory of what happened, and don't let that positive memory get disputed by, oh yeah, but then you became an opioid addict.
Mm-hmm.
Like just sit in the fact that you did some really great work at one time.
Give yourself credit. Yeah.
Give yourself credit, and don't erase that good.
Yeah. Yeah. It is weird in healthcare that way. Eh? Maybe it's because we're expected to do so much without, it's kind of our job. So, it's not like in your case, if you save somebody's life, you could look at it as well. That's what I'm supposed to do. Right. But that's a pretty amazing thing. So,
right.
Yeah, we have to at least make some sort of an effort to balance out the way you're viewing those events.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And the last one I had that I wanted to talk about was fortune telling, because I love to fortune tell. I walk around and I make all sorts of predictions. And that's fine. But believing that you have the power to see in the future or tell what somebody's thinking, this is a dangerous way of viewing the world.
So how have you been able to dispute that?
Well, I think it's just it's a matter of kind of intercepting those thoughts with rational auditing.
Yeah.
If I catch myself making assumptions based on something that I have no evidence for, maybe it's just a feeling, or I believe that my intuition is somehow going to give me an edge in predicting what's going to happen, even though it statistically doesn't make any sense. I have to check myself, and I have to be in the habit of checking myself, because it is a default setting. And there's something about, because I love being right when I do that, right? I love to be able to predict what somebody's behavior is going to be, or I like to be able to think I have an inside look at somebody before I really do. And I mean, you don't have to think about it too much before you realize that there's a lot of problems that could come with thinking like that, right?
Yeah. The really complicated thing to me about that is because I consider myself to be a fairly intuitive person as well, to be both, to acknowledge our that positive side of our intuition, because being intuitive serves us very well in many, many circumstances.
Yeah.
But when we are predicting an outcome, and it's usually, again, the warning sign for that is that we are usually predicting a negative outcome, and we are usually at the center of that negative outcome. Then it's not serving us. So maybe that's a kind of a question to ask ourselves: like, is it intuition about when we're driving and you have the intuition to back off, say? Well, that's one that serves us very well. But if we are at the center of it, and the story that we're telling ourselves is one that is sort of harmful or leading us down this kind of negative path, and then to back off on that intuition and let it unfold is, I guess, a healthier option. But it's hard for the intuitive person to let that go.
It is, because it is one of those things where you have to find the sweet spot, right? You gotta because like some people, there's no question that some people they can pick up on emotional cues more accurately and faster than other people. This is just a fact.
For sure.
So that being said, you're right. You have to somehow reconcile, find a way to objectively kind of parse that out for ourselves. And again, it's another skill that you get better at. And as long as you're, first of all, aware that it's a behavior pattern that you have been using and one that's been persistent, then you can start making those challenges.
Yeah, for sure. Like, am I being caught? Is the difference between caution and fortune telling? And like you said, it comes down to really paying attention to the specifics of what that thought are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of this like door-to-door salesmen coming around, and there are so many. There was a circumstance that I had recently where someone came to the door and he wanted to sell me a security system for my house and was asking me all these personal questions about the house. And then afterwards thinking, boy, I didn't trust that guy. And boy, that interaction didn't feel right. So that's an example where, and as it turned out, everything was okay because I went and found him afterwards and it turned out to be legit. But like, that's where intuition, or that recognizing that dis-ease, kept me safe, and I could go back to my home and realize, okay, I'm safe and my home is safe. But if my mind went to a place of, this guy's going to break into my house tonight while I'm sleeping and murder me, and there's nothing I can do about it, that thought isn't serving me very well.
No, it's likely to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I'm going to lose sleep, and I'm going to have some sort of maladaptive behavior to try to manage it, and away we go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that that covers the personal ones for me. Did you have any other ones you wanted to add there, Corey?
No, I mean, there are many, many more examples of these things, but I think we covered it there.
Okay, excellent.